welcome everybody. My name is Patricia Zavala. I'm the Executive Director of PowerHouse Texas and the Texas Energy and Climate Caucus. We're really happy that you guys could join us today for the Energy Innovation Forum on the hydrogen economy and unlocking the potential of hydrogen in Texas. The goal of these Energy Innovation Forums is to bring together academics, community leaders, industry leaders, and policymakers to really explore the ins and outs of emerging energy technologies to help inform policy solutions. Texas has really been at the forefront of many energy revolutions throughout history, starting with oil and gas, fracking, renewable energy, and now we're at the precipice of another huge energy revolution, and we're really excited to be able to put on these events and to bring really smart people together and figure out what are the best policy solutions to make sure we do it right. So we have a great lineup of speakers today. I'm going to announce each one of you. If you could please just raise your hand. We'll have you come up in a bit, but I just want to introduce Dr. Joshua Rhodes, research scientist with the Weber Energy Group. Nichole Saunders with Environmental Defense Fund, senior attorney. Mark Stover with Apex Clean Energy. And Roxana Bekemohammadi. I think I got that right. So before we start with our program, we first want to thank all the people that made this event happen, starting with our program director for PowerHouse Texas, Lindsay Lambert. Could you please raise your hand in the back? Thank you, Lindsay, for your amazing work. A little bit of history on PowerHouse Texas. We were formed last year by the Texas Energy and Climate Caucus, which is a bipartisan legislative caucus here in the Texas legislature. And PowerHouse Texas is a nonprofit, nonpartisan education that really educates and cultivates energy policy leaders through, these energy innovation forums, and additionally through our energy policy fellowship program. This is our inaugural class of our energy policy fellows, and we'd like to acknowledge them. We have 6 fellows that are placed in 6 offices throughout this building. 6 of them are in Republican offices. 3 of them are in Republican offices. 3 of them are in Democratic offices, working on energy bills this legislative session. So we would ask you to stand up if you're an energy policy fellow with us. Natalie Villafranca, Cameron Granados, Hafiz Shah, Julie Blocker, Anaga Upal, and Denise Palacios. We're really excited to have these very talented and smart energy policy fellows. Will hopefully be the future of policymaking in Texas. We also want to thank the chair of the Texas Caucus on Climate, or the Texas Energy and Climate Caucus, Representative Erin Zwiener, for her vision and leadership. And we also want to thank our funders, the Energy Foundation, Nichole Foundation, Hershey's Foundation, Climate Works, and the Meadows Foundation. So here's what you can expect for today's format. We'll start with an overview and presentation on hydrogen. Then we'll move into a panel discussion moderated by one of our Texas journalists. And then also we'll wrap up with audience Q&A before kicking it off for our reception with food and drinks in the members' lounge. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Joshua Rhodes. He'll be kicking things off with an overview on hydrogen. So let's give him a round of applause.
My name is Joshua Rhodes. I'm a research scientist at the University of Texas. I teach mechanical engineering, energy data analytics, and study energy systems. And for the past year or so, the past couple years, have been working on a big DOE H2 at scale project that has been focused around hydrogen in Texas and Port Houston and some other types of things. We've been looking at hydrogen we've been looking at it for a while, but really intensely in the past little while. And so I want to talk today about what is hydrogen and what it could mean for Texas. So first, what is hydrogen? Hydrogen, if you remember from your periodic table, I promise I won't do too much chemistry here, but it is in the top left. It is the lightest and actually the most abundant element in the universe, although it's not always in the right place at the right time, which kind of is the story of our lives, but here we are. Sometimes you may see it as it's generally H2 because it comes in pairs. Sometimes it'll be a subscript. Sometimes if people haven't got around to the subscript thing, it's just H2. And it's found in a lot of other molecules. In fact, it's found in water, H2O. That's hydrogen. It's also found in CH4 or methane or natural gas, and so it's a part of a lot of different things that we use, and it also burns. It burns like natural gas, or not exactly like it, but it does burn. And so why do we care about hydrogen today? Well, it's already a big industry here. Texas already has produces and consumes about 1/3 of U.S. hydrogen, about 9 million kilograms per day or 20 million pounds of hydrogen per day. We already have about 700 plus miles of hydrogen pipelines, mostly situated around the Gulf Coast, down to between Freeport and Beaumont, and they go into Louisiana. And we generally use it in a lot of our industrial processes today. So we use it in oil refining, we use it to desulfurize diesel in oil refining, and also fertilizer production to make ammonia. So we already use it a lot of hydrogen across Texas today. So how do we get hydrogen? So hydrogen is generally produced in one of two ways. There are other ways, but I'll stick to these because these are the kind we mostly do. There's SMR, or steam methane reforming, where basically we take natural gas, again it's CH4, there's hydrogen in there. We take natural gas and we split it into hydrogen, and through a couple different processes, it's not a one-step process, but we end up with basically hydrogen and carbon dioxide. Or we can take electrolysis and we can split water. So we got H2O, we can split that hydrogen off, we get hydrogen and water. The vast majority of hydrogen produced today is produced via steam methane reforming, so it has its associated carbon emissions, and generally those are just vented into the atmosphere today. And although hydrogen is a colorless gas, if you were to have it in a chemistry class and look at it, it would be a colorless gas. It's sometimes referred to by a color. So you may have heard of things like gray hydrogen. So gray hydrogen just means that hydrogen I was talking about, hydrogen produced via steam methane reforming. So taking that CH4, that natural gas, and splitting it into hydrogen and CO2. That's gray hydrogen. Now, some folks are also talking about blue hydrogen. Blue hydrogen is that process, except that you take that CO2 and you capture it before it's vented into the atmosphere, and maybe use it for a different process, or you sequester it, say, down in a well or something like that. So that's what people mean when they're called blue hydrogen. We're still splitting natural gas, but we're getting most of that CO2 that comes off of it. And then there's green hydrogen, which is hydrogen produced by electrolysis. So this is that splitting of water into hydrogen and oxygen. The hydrogen's not actually that color. These are just kind of handy mnemonics that have been given about it, although I will say that the industry is trying to get away from this, particularly with tax credits available through the IRA. They're trying to get into more of like a carbon content of hydrogen and away from these colors, but it's generally still talked about in these colors in these ways. So what are the possible uses for hydrogen? So beyond refining, hydrogen has a lot of other potential uses. Some of it can be used in place of natural gas. We can use it to make electric power through things like fuel cells, or different companies like GE and others are making turbines that can actually burn it directly at various blends, some up to 30%, and some are trying to get all the way up to 100%. And then there's also the ability to use it in industrial heating. A lot of the chemical and industrial processes that we have require very localized high temperature heat. We generally get that from natural gas, but we could some of those things could be substituted in for hydrogen. Also, steel making, other types of things. And it can also be used for long distance road, rail, marine type fuels, either as liquefied or compressed hydrogen. We can compress it just like we compress natural gas, or we can liquefy it just like we have liquefied natural gas if we compress it even further and keep it cold. And so it can be, moved and kept around for that, or it can be made into things like ammonia, which we generally call hydrogen carriers. So it has hydrogen in it, but there's no carbon in it. So whenever you're utilizing it, you might not have the associated carbon emissions. Ammonia is a precursor for a lot of fertilizers and things like that as well. So it'll be the future of hydrogen in Texas. Well, I think the global market for clean hydrogen, with an emphasis on the clean hydrogen part, could be pretty massive. This is a chart from Bloomberg New Energy Finance showing that the rest of the world wants clean molecules. I think I think they're coming around to the conclusion that you can't electrify necessarily everything. Sometimes having the molecules in either gaseous or liquid forms can be helpful in terms of different processes, things like industrial or long distance transportation. And so between now and 2050, there looks to be a pretty big growth in the amount of global hydrogen demand for clean hydrogen. Texas is already a major energy exporter through LNG and refined oil products, things like that. And as our research is indicating that clean hydrogen could be a potential path to staying that way. The world's still going to want molecules. They are going to want clean molecules. And so I think we can give them what they want. There's some what are possible issues. It's not completely all rosy all the time. Hydrogen is a small molecule. It is hard to keep inside pipe and fittings, so we have to make sure that we pay very close attention to the infrastructure that we use it. Hydrogen is volatile. It needs careful handling. It does burn. And things like leakage in the atmosphere can have some climate warming implications that we can get into if we, given the relative amount of other things in the atmosphere as well. So with that, I will kind of stop there, and so we'll move on to the next stage.
Thank you so much. So now we will move into our panel discussion. So I'm going to call up our panelists. If you would please come up to the dais. So Dr. Joshua Rhodes, Roxana Bekemohammadi, Nichole Saunders with Environmental Defense Fund, and Mark Stover. And this panel will be moderated by Dylan Baddour of the Inside Climate News. So if you could come up as well. So to kick things off, we're going to start with a short video shared with us by Nichole Saunders of Environmental Defense Fund.
There is a lot of buzz surrounding future source of clean energy. We're talking, of course, about hydrogen. With hundreds of billions of dollars pouring into projects across the globe, all eyes are on hydrogen as the next generation clean energy source. And rightfully so. When done right, hydrogen can deliver tremendous benefits to our climate. It can play a key role in sectors that are hard to decarbonize, like cement and steel making, rather than sectors that can be electrified, like cars and home heating. But when it's done wrong, it can cause more damage in the next few decades than the fossil fuels it's intended to replace. So what is hydrogen, and how can we make sure it delivers on its clean energy promise? I am Tianyi Sun, and I'm here to set the record straight. Hydrogen is the most abundant chemical element in the universe.
Mr. Sun is not solid or liquid, but a fiery ball of hot, glowing gases consisting of 95% hydrogen and helium.
And it's found in water, plants, and animals. But hydrogen molecules are hard to find on their own and require a lot of energy to produce. That's why it was reserved for specialty uses in the past, like rocket fuel.
2, 1, booster ignition, and liftoff.
Now, everyone is excited about hydrogen because it can be a clean alternative to fossil fuels if produced with very little climate pollution. It can power many things, from planes and ships to heavy industrial and manufacturing equipment. But it can still contribute to climate change. When it's emitted into the atmosphere, it indirectly causes warming. Hydrogen triggers chemical reactions in the atmosphere, increasing the amount of other pollutants like methane that contribute to warming. And it is such a small molecule that is easy to leak from any infrastructure. Our research shows if hydrogen leakage rate is high, it can severely undermine the climate benefit we wanted to achieve. but we have virtually no real-world data on how much hydrogen leakage could occur, let alone how to mitigate it. For the type of hydrogen produced from natural gas, the extra methane emissions on top of hydrogen leakage could make it even worse for the climate in the near term. More research is needed to understand the full impact of hydrogen on our climate, and especially to figure out how to safely and effectively harness its energy while minimizing leaks. If we work together to deploy clean hydrogen responsibly, it will be a powerful tool against climate change. Let's get this right.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Patricia. My name is Dylan Baddour. I cover Texas for Inside Climate News, Energy and Environment here in Texas, coming to you from Lockhart. Drove in from the south this morning. Let's get to our panel. That video was shown on behalf of Nichole Saunders here from the EDF. That was her introduction. So we're going to go down the list here. And maybe let's hear from Mark Stover here from Apex Clean Energy today.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Dylan, and thank you to PowerHouse Texas for the invitation. Glad to be here today. And I see Representative Goodwin. I'm going to thank her for teaching me how to open a door in the Capitol today. I was texting and thinking about this presentation. My mind was elsewhere, and I heard very politely behind me, push, push. I was pulling on the push door, so I made it thanks to her. I'm just going to briefly talk about I'm thinking of an old company of mine, Apex Clean Energy, and talk about our green hydrogen production interests here in Texas. So a little background on Apex. We're a privately financed independent power producer. We're a U.S.-based company headquartered in Charlottesville, Virginia. We have about 400 employees. Our history has been in utility-scale wind, solar, and energy storage. About two and a half years ago, we decided to move into the green fuels space, and we have begun. We're kind of early, getting close to mid-stage in some development activities on 3 green hydrogen production facilities in Texas. To date, in Texas, as I said, though, we have been focused on wind, solar, and storage. Since 2012, we've commercialized nationwide about 8 gigawatts of wind and solar. That's about a $10 billion portfolio. In Texas, we've built over 3,000 megawatts of mainly wind and some solar. That is almost a $4 billion investment in this state. And those are projects which over the lifetime will generate $2 billion in local tax revenue and landowner income, mainly for rural Texans. Our activities in terms of power sales have focused on Fortune 500 America, U.S. military. We have a project with Fort Hood, other independent power producers, utilities, financial institutions, et cetera. So, as I said, we started to move into the green hydrogen space about two and a half years ago. We had some experience working with a company called Plug Power. They focused on the transportation sector. They were looking to build a new production facility in Texas. We were developing some renewable energy assets that they were looking to power their facility. So we helped them with some of their development activities. They ended up purchasing the power from a 500 megawatt wind farm that we developed in North Texas. And I think after that experience, with our track record on developing large scale assets in the wind and solar space, we felt pretty comfortable going into the green hydrogen, green fuels space. So we've got, as I said, 3 projects in development right now. Hopeful that the first project will be commercialized in 2026. And as was already shown in some of the slides, what is driving our interest is the need to further decarbonize non-electricity sectors. So we're interested in agriculture and manufacturing, chemical processing, transportation as well. We have some interest in the power space as well. A lot of talk in the building and elsewhere since Winter Storm Uri about dispatchable resources, a lot of focus on natural gas power plants right now. There are some companies that are taking a look at burning green hydrogen instead of natural gas in those power plants. There are a few companies that right now have new natural gas facilities that are hydrogen capable. Blending, as I think was mentioned earlier, but then also the capability to go 100% green hydrogen. So dispatchable fleet burning green hydrogen instead of natural gas. Our investment activities in the state will result in, I have to be a little broad with my numbers, I apologize, but this is a very competitive space right now, and my development team doesn't want me going into numbers too much, but we're looking at roughly a $10 to $15 billion investment in the state. And just to take a step back and talk about Texas and green hydrogen, I think the state should absolutely dominate the green hydrogen space, the green fuel space. We've got the energy history. Obviously, we've got the capital. We have the workforce. We have the resources. If you're looking for green hydrogen from wind and solar, no better state than Texas for those resources. And we've got a lot of expertise. So I will stop there and look forward to the questions with the panelists. Thanks.
Great. So just to make sure everyone here understands, Mark, when you say that Apex is looking to get into green hydrogen in Texas, you're saying that those renewable energy power projects will be applied to fuel to power electrolysis to make hydrogen out of water.
That is correct. These will be behind the meter projects, so we'll have the electrolyzer, and that will be fed entirely by on-site wind, solar, and storage. Both the electrolyzer and the renewable energy park will have grid interconnections, but minimal amounts of power drawn from the grid really for stability purposes. And then if we're in a production cycle with the electrolyzer where we have excess wind, solar, or battery capacity, we will look to push that out onto the grid.
Okay, thank you. All right, here next to me we have Roxana Bekemohammadi of the U.S. Hydrogen Alliance, the founder and director. Roxana, welcome here. Tell us a little bit about what you're here for.
Thank you so much. I got to lean into this a little bit. Yes, thank you so much. It's Roxana Bekemohammadi. There's certainly too many letters and too many syllables. I am the founder and executive director of the U.S. Hydrogen Alliance. We are a member-based trade association that's focused on hydrogen and fuel cell advocacy. Now, to understand the organization, you probably should know something about me. When I was 15 years old, I was a crazy girl with green highlights sitting on a recycling dumpster, wishing for the day that I would go and work for what I called at that time the sassiest environmental agency in the world, the California Air Resources Board, part of the California EPA. Do you know how crazy those Californians are? So, right. And I actually decided to be an engineer. I became an engineer so I could be better and more well-rounded policymaker. I wanted to understand why we couldn't have more stringent regulations. I wanted to let policymakers know what technologies were viable. And so 10 years later, I did that. And so I actually I am a fuel cell engineer, and I bring that knowledge to all of us to talk about what is pragmatic and what isn't, and really to understand this thing called hydrogen. It's a beautiful love story that I really look forward to exploring with you today. But essentially, the most important thing that I've gained in my time in policy is that we really aren't looking at solving our environmental, energy, and transportation crises from a systematic perspective. We need to look at it holistically. We can't just, hydrogen is seen as kind of almost like, I don't know, think of it the Wednesday Addams. We can't just judge a character just by one feature. We really have to judge the entire system. And so that is really what I'd like to bring into each state legislature. We've actually passed 14 bills in the western states the previous year. We educate policymakers. We have something called the Policy Leaders Roundtable. If you want to take a look, it's on the back of the pamphlet. You can go to our webpage and sign up. We provide education, model legislation. We will come to your state, we will advocate, and we will work closely with you to work and develop non-biased, common sense policies that are actually going to help your state. They are not special interest because we believe in operating integrity. So that is a little bit about us.
All right, thank you very much, Roxana. And of course, y'all heard from Dr. Joshua Rhodes at the beginning. Joshua, anything else you want to say before we get started here?
Bring on the questions. Let's go.
Okay, great. All right, well, then I'm going to start with Nichole over here, who put her video up to show us. Nichole, your video there said that hydrogen can can provide us many benefits to climate and environment when it is done properly. But when it's done improperly, there can be a lot of problems. In fact, this is a very complicated topic, and we're talking about several products here. Hydrogen produced from natural gas is very different from hydrogen produced from water. Although the product is the same, the process is not. Neither are the emissions profiles. So Nichole, help us understand a little bit of what we have to watch out for to know that this is being done right and to avoid some kind of easy pitfalls.
Sure, thanks. And thanks for letting me cede a little bit of my introductory time to Dr. Tianyi Sun, who also works with us in Austin, and I think had a little bit more compelling use of 3 minutes than I probably could have tossed at you today. But thanks for the question. One of the things that EDF is really working on, which kind of reflects a lot of our historic work in methane and in methane emissions, is looking at what do we actually genuinely know about the climate ramifications of a transition to a broader, larger hydrogen economy. And so I think what we need to be thinking about, and as made clear by all the presentations today, is that we're really taking a clear-eyed approach to what is the real role of hydrogen, which types of hydrogen, in what places, and under what circumstances. And one of the main things that recent research out of EDF is highlighting is that when hydrogen does leak, and it is quite, it's the tiniest little thing out there in our periodic table, and because of that, it is slippery and can leak. It has ramifications not just for safety, which we've been tracking effectively for quite some time, but also for the climate. So I'm not one of our scientists, so I'm going to try and use some numbers, but forgive me if I have to correct myself later. But the short answer is that in the really short term, which we're mostly used to looking at climate ramifications of a fuel switch over a 100-year time span. If you look in a 10 or a 20-year time span, if hydrogen is leaked, it can have really, really significant impacts on warming because of those interactions that take place in the atmosphere and really ramp up other greenhouse gases. And that has implications for how we make decisions on when and where to use it and under what circumstances. So the best things that we can be doing are increasing our commitment to research to better understand where and when, under what circumstances does leakage happen? How do we reduce that leakage and ensure it does not occur? Taking the short-term influence into account when we make policy decisions and have conversations about hydrogen is better than fossil in X situation, because if we look at 100 years, it's going to look very different than if we look at 20-year time frame, sometimes 30 times more powerful than CO2 hydrogen can be in that really short time frame. And beyond that, really kind of taking this big picture approach. I loved what you said about taking a full systematic approach to how we think about our system. I don't know if we're going to talk about them later, but if we think about the hydrogen hubs, which if you think about opportunities being presented in this country, the hydrogen hubs out of DOE is a huge $9 billion, $8 or $9 billion, I forget the number today. 10?
It's 8.
8, thank you. It's 8, and then it adds up to 12 with DAC, yeah. So, but it is a massive opportunity for the United States to demonstrate itself as a leader in what this looks like to do a hydrogen economy right. And Texas is going to be right in the center of it. There's no way around Texas playing a really important role in this. And so one of the projects we've developed, and I'd be happy to talk about more, but won't take time today, is a project called Baddour Hubs. And it kind of takes that aspect of, we're not just thinking about CO2, we're not just thinking about water use, we're not just thinking about community engagement and community planning, but can we use this new, cleaner industrial revolution to look at it all together from the forefront? So all these companies are coming together, from supply to demand to disposition and in between, and doing these projects together. So how can we use this opportunity to kind of flip the switch on how we do this kind of industrial planning and think about it all up front, make really sound decisions?
Okay, and when we talk about this hydrogen transition and energy revolution, we've got a lot of federal money coming out of Washington to incentivize this. Of course, what portion are we looking at as going to market with hydrogen made from water versus hydrogen made from fossil fuels? What do we expect?
I think that's a hard answer. That it's not the answer that's coming down to play in how the money is spent is not necessarily specific to how the hydrogen is produced as much as its climate implication is how the policies are being set out. And it might be that others on the panel can better speak to this today. I do know that how the hubs are set out, DOE is obligated to fund a variety of both in uses and production methods. So there will be probably 2 blue hydrogen hubs, a nuclear hydrogen hub, a green hydrogen hub, or 2. So they're spreading out this demonstration effort so that each one of those production methods gets an opportunity to show what they can do and what they can prove in this moment. But it's really hard to predict how the market's going to play out on where those priorities land.
Okay. All right, speaking of those hubs, let's go to Roxana then and talk about communities and how this can influence actual people. In a previous generation of industrial development, there was some conflicts. Sometimes development got a bad name, putting all the pollution on a separate group of people than who all the profits go to, and affecting communities negatively. Now we see we have this opportunity for another generation of growth. How can we make use of this opportunity to ensure that the benefits are equitably distributed? Or in other words, how are kind of common people going to see some benefit from this new era?
Thank you. It's really unfortunate to me because when I see, my fellow enviros at state houses, it's crazy that we're going head to head because I don't think we should. On the water piece, just really quickly, from even a disadvantaged community perspective or even from just a regional perspective, every single state has its own resources. Every single region has its own specific resources. And so where we generate this from is that's how we're really going to figure it out. But, as long as we have humans, we have biogas. And so that's really critical to understand. And that plays into the disadvantaged community piece as well as the local economic opportunities, which is as long as you have landfills, wastewater treatment facilities, any kind of farms, you have pretty much free biogas. Yes, you have to clean it up, et cetera, but are we looking to use that in a very sustainable manner? So we have methane that's just being released right there. So I would say if we could capture that and produce hydrogen, regardless of the leakage, or even if there is some leakage, we would still have environmental benefits because it's actually, the environmental potential is not the same but also the end use of it is really critical because if we're putting it into heavy duty equipment, into trucks that are normally going by the same houses, it's on the same freeways, it's going to the same industrial complexes, ports, seaports, airports, all of the above, through on railways. I mean, these are people that are continuously facing the same kind of carcinogenic exposure, and so they're developing cancer at earlier rates. Their children are developing asthma at very, very young ages. And so they're being exposed to things that are not reversible. And so if we can get zero-emission trucks into their hands ASAP and zero-emission heavy-duty equipment into those communities, that would be absolutely critical. And one thing I want to explain that doesn't actually get discussed enough is that hydrogen fuel cells are exactly like batteries. They're both electrochemical devices. Only difference is the fuel is outside, whereas in a battery, the fuel is within it. So you're getting the same kind of environmental benefit, but the difference is that whole piece about the fuel being outside of it means that we can actually haul more freight. And so the kind of applications that you see with fuel cell electric motive applications is greater. So we could essentially have long-haul zero-emission trucks that we wouldn't see with battery electric technology. We can see long-haul rail applications. We can see planes going to zero as well. And by the way, let me just say that this is not a battle between fuel cells and batteries. Every fuel cell electric vehicle will always have a battery in conjunction with it. It's always a hybridized drivetrain. So there's no battle there, but really it's a win-win situation when we actually accept it as a reality.
Okay, so clean burning hydrogen fuel cell vehicles can...
Not burning.
Okay, sorry.
Clean chemical reaction.
Sorry. Clean hydrogen fuel cell vehicles can alleviate some of that pollution burden on urban communities that are often choked with a lot of...
Well, completely.
Yeah.
So we can go from, PM inverted, just like the bad air quality that you normally would see in these settings, to completely clean air. Because there would be nothing emitting anything.
Okay. Great. All right, let's move on. Joshua, we're going to talk about the big question in the room, which is water here. It seems like a key to this whole big transition working well is a lot of hydrogen produced from water as opposed to more produced from fossil fuels. Texas, of course, especially in the areas of renewable energy abundance, the West, the North, has limits of water resources. How is that going to play into affecting the growth, and what kind of does the research tell us about where those limitations are?
Yeah, thanks. So as part of the that H2 at Scale project, which is kind of the precursor to these DOE hub projects, we looked at a lot of different ways of producing hydrogen in Texas, be it via SMR on the coast, via electrolysis of the coast. We looked at via renewable energy out in West Texas and piping it down to the coast, which would need a lot of water if it were to be green hydrogen kind of out in West Texas. But one of the things we looked at is not just using, and there's a lot of competition for that water already, but one of the things we looked at is there's actually a lot of water out in West Texas. It's just not always the kind of water that you want. So we have a lot of brackish groundwater that can't really be used for that much else of things. You're not going to use it for agriculture. You're not going to clean up for drinking. But we looked at how much would it cost to actually clean that water up to the point where it could be used to make hydrogen, and it added a few percent to the cost of hydrogen, but it wasn't too crazy. And we kind of calculated at the current rate of hydrogen production that we have in the state right now, that we've got about 4,000 years worth of it.
Okay. But that would require, do you know anything about the purity standards for water for electrolysis? Do you require a higher or lower treatment standard than drinking water?
A higher treatment standard. It essentially needs to be about distilled water quality in order you'll foul up, the electrolysis commitment. But that we calculated that in as our calculations.
Okay. Great. Big question there. Mark, I got a question for you now, but I wonder if you want to say anything about the water bit also.
Well, as a development company, I probably should. And when my leadership team first came to me and said we were moving into the green hydrogen industry in Texas, my very first question was, where are we getting the water? What are we doing about water? Because when I'm in this building, that's the only question I'm going to get from policymakers, and it is. I would like to say a lot more about how we're going to address that issue, but because of the competitive nature of this space right now, and look, I've done a lot of conferences and panel sessions in my past. I get it. When you see the guy on the panel who says, well, I'd like to say this or I'd like to say that. Unfortunately, I have to be that guy a little bit right now because this space is so competitive. What I can say is that most of our development team is from Texas. We are acutely aware of water issues. We are focused. And, look, this is a company that was founded on accelerating the shift to clean energy, to decarbonizing as many industries as possible. That is the mission of this company. And being responsible in terms of how we use resources is top of mind. We are exploring some creative solutions. We're having conversations with a number of industries that are already using water in the areas of the state that Josh just mentioned. We are focused on ensuring minimal impacts to water supply and completely, potentially, avoiding the use of any fresh water. So I think at some point in the near future, our team will be a little bit more comfortable talking about the water source for our green hydrogen facilities. Again, lots of conversations taking place with a number of parties. I don't think folks are quite ready at this point to publicly disclose that, but it is something that we are well aware of, we take very seriously, and again, with a team that is based in Texas and living and working in the areas where we're developing these projects, we want to make sure that job one is to get water right.
Just real quickly, it's not like the water disappears forever, you guys. It comes back because when it's electrolysis is just a fuel cell in reverse. That's the simplest way of putting it. So when we run that hydrogen in a fuel cell vehicle or a stationary fuel cell to produce power, the output is only water. That's our only emission. So it comes back out. Question is where it comes out, but that's a whole other thing.
That's right. I was going to go into that territory, but I wanted to let the engineer handle that one. But.
So are we talking about like dripping wet highways? Full
No,
of
I
hydrogen
wouldn't.
traffic?
I mean, that is. Maybe that would be great for the movies. It's not that dramatic, unfortunately. I would love that. Maybe we'd have more, ponds, I guess, right under our cars. But no. I mean, it comes out, it drips. I mean, it can come out. It depends how hot it is outside. But yeah, no. It's
Okay. Have you seen the highways in Houston? That's a lot of drips.
there. You know what? It's been some time.
Okay. Well, you're lucky.
1 minute.
Okay. We got 1 minute left, Mark. I want to know real quick. You've been for a few years looking at these hydrogen projects in Texas. How much engagement have you gotten from the state of Texas?
Not much. I think everyone involved in the hub activities, and I'll take a step back. So when we launched into green hydrogen, our goal has always been from the very first project to stand up facilities that can stand on their own. Now, no doubt the IRA that was mentioned earlier is supercharging the green hydrogen space. When you look at the production tax credit for hydrogen from the IRA, it is going to bring green hydrogen production costs down considerably. Now, we'll still be above market compared to hydrogen production from natural gas, but we're going to close the gap considerably. We don't have any specific policy needs in the state right now. We've had conversations with a number of policymakers, and I think maybe one way to answer it, I'm engaged in a number of other states, and what we do see in Louisiana and Oklahoma and Nebraska and Kansas is a very high level of engagement from the governor's office down into the legislature. There's intense competition for these hubs, $8 billion. I forget how many we're going to have nationwide, 5, 6, somewhere in that neighborhood.
They change their mind every day.
They do. The competition is on, and I guess I could say, or maybe I should say, I've seen higher levels of engagement in other states.
Okay.
And three of the I know we're supposed to wrap up, but 3 of the hubs that are being given go ahead to apply in Texas. There's 3 in Texas, but Texas is unique in that Texas itself as a state is not a member of any of the hub applications as an entity, whereas in Louisiana and numerous other states, the state itself is a proponent of the hub application, which I think is really interesting to watch play out here.
That's a good point. And to be fair, there are multiple hub applications in the state. If I'm a decision maker, do you go in on all of them? Do you pick one? Right. Houston has a very competitive application. We happen to be partnering right now with Corpus. When we launched our activities, we formed a joint venture with the Port of Corpus, a sister company of ours, Epic Midstream, who will build a hydrogen dedicated pipeline. A few other actors are involved, but again, to be fair, if I'm the state, I probably stay hands off. And my guess too is that from the governor's office down, everybody feels like Texas is going to get a hub. It's impossible for me to be in a position where I think Texas gets excluded. I just cannot see that happening. I think Texas could get 2, quite frankly.
Okay. Roxana is going to make a comment real quickly, and then after this, we're going to move on to our question and answer with the audience. So everyone be thinking of the questions that you want. We'll have just 1 minute here. We'll take your questions. Go on, Roxana.
We're talking about something that seems a bit esoteric at times. Yes, there's money tied to it. Yes, there's environmental considerations, et cetera, et cetera. But really, at the end of the day, the people matter. The health of our constituents matter. That's number 1. But number 2, our soldiers that are dying abroad matter. We lose, our casualties are about 60% from fuel retrieval. The U.S. Army has said that hydrogen is the next tactical fuel. We're either going to make it ourselves or we're going to get it from our allies because our foes are certainly making it. Right now, the question is the Port of Houston going to export more hydrogen than Russia? Because Russia is planning to be the number 1 exporter of hydrogen. So this is great. We can talk about energy, but we can also talk about our national security, and that should be number 1. We finally have another chance at producing all of our energy needs domestically. If we walk away from this, I don't know when the next time we're going to have this opportunity. And hydrogen fills all the gaps within the energy sectors, from nuclear to solar to wind to oil, gas, coal, all of the above. So I just want to leave it on that light note.
All right, and let's go to your questions.
How prevalent is methane leakage, I think was the question. And I don't even think we have enough time for me to get into that today. There are a lot of different factors. I don't have the percentage off the top of my head to give you. There's numerous resources I can point you to. Colin Layden, Texas Director of EDF, right there is one of them. The thing I think to take into consideration is just how it plays into the system when we're making our calculations on how we're incentivizing and making claims of climate benefits. So if you look at a hydrogen production that's based in natural gas as the form of production of that hydrogen, we need to take into consideration not just the efficiency of the carbon capture at that facility and how much CO2 is being captured and long-term sequestered, but also the hydrogen leakage long-term across that chain and the methane emissions from upstream. And so, we've talked for a long time about methane emissions in Texas and beyond. It's something that's been really hard to tackle, and I think one of the things you can learn from that hydrogen has an opportunity with is that we've learned in methane emissions and abatement that it's a lot more expensive to retrofit or to fix leaks later than it is to plan our system in a way that we know it will not leak under the circumstances we design it for to begin with. And so one of the challenges will be dealing with the ramifications of that upstream emission and how it impacts the CO2 equivalent or how that hydrogen is classified on the market. So I think it's a really good question. I think it's going to depend entirely on what state the gas is from, what their regulations are around methane emissions, and all of that. So it's just another piece of the pie that we're taking just a really clear-eyed approach in. How do we use this to the most logical path, and it's actually creating a climate benefit and also being done in a way that protects communities and public health.
And Nichole, just to say briefly, when we talk about upstream in the oil field, in natural gas recovery, it's fair to say that methane emissions and leakage are extremely prolific and relatively unregulated, correct?
It depends on where you are.
In Texas.
think in Texas, they are much less regulated than a majority of other places, yes. However, there's a lot of work being done. The federal government is also taking into consideration methane emission standards. And I think if, from EDS perspective, if you look at the upstream where the methane and natural gas is being produced, when you look at it upstream, you want to see like a 0.2% leakage rate in that upstream. That doesn't take into consideration the midstream. But that's where the industry is headed. The industry has made claims that they can really hit those targets of extremely low emissions. And if they hit that, then that changes the calculation. But they won't hit it everywhere. So making sure you're paying attention to that piece is really important.
Okay, thank you. Question, you, sir, right there.
Can I just say off the bat, it's really rare that would be rate-based, unless the gas utilities are taking it on and they're going to either be a producer or distributed. That's when they would do it. And then I don't normally see electric utilities really get into this game, to be honest, but
I think in general the question is also, is a hydrogen energy future an expensive energy future?
Well, any transition is an expensive one, and not only that, but our grid alone needs a lot of infrastructure updates. So does our gas pipelines as well. I mean, the thing is that it's like your house. You're always maintaining it. And the question is, how important are some of these things for you and your community? I mean, how important is air quality? How important is energy resiliency? I think you guys know a little bit about that here. And I mean, all of these are investments and everything's expensive. I mean, it's hard to live. I think it's the same way as you consider your daily life. It's very similar.
Yeah, I'll just say, if you're talking about the electricity sector, ERCOT is a competitive state, so there would be nothing that's going into a rate base there. It would be, if a competitive provider decides to move into green hydrogen, that will show up in the RET bill if a customer chooses to go with that particular provider. We do have non-ERCOT areas in the state, SPP and MISO. If those utilities were to enter, in fact, I know Entergy right now is in eastern Texas trying to deploy a new natural gas facility. They want to retire some older assets, and they have talked in their proceedings at the commission about their new gas facility being hydrogen capable, either blended or going to 100%, that would be something that ends up getting rate based because that is still a vertically integrated regulated utility by the commission. But for the ERCOT portion, which is 90% of the state, that would be competitive electric power sales.
So the question is, can produced oil field wastewater be used anyway for electrolysis? Is anyone thinking about that?
I have thoughts. I bet you do too.
Yeah, I mean, I think we probably all have thoughts. I mean, with frac flowback, with whatever you're getting out of hydraulic fracturing, it really depends on what's coming back up with it. Sometimes it can be really nasty, and you don't really want to put in all the energy that it would take to clean that up. And particularly if you're setting up a large industry that would need to clean a bunch of water for hydrogen, you're probably going to want to have more certainty on what your input, like your brackish input water quality would be. And so that would probably, I would imagine, probably be more tapping into brackish groundwater resources that, again, couldn't be used for anything else, but that, and probably not so much on frac flowback.
All right, we just got a few more minutes here, so who else has something to say about that?
I'm happy to talk about that further. I've spent like 8 years at EDF looking at produced water characterization and the ramifications of its reuse. But I think Dr. Rhodes is spot on that if you think about the economics of the system, produced water is going to add significantly more cost to the hydrogen equation, and you're also going to be thinking about numerous other like toxicological and public health risks in terms of not only managing the water as it moves through that system, but also managing the residual waste streams that you would have to pull out to get to the level of distillation. And even distilled produced waters can contain pretty significant amounts that are impactful to public health of toxic constituents. So brilliant idea. Like, it is going to be on the table. People are going to think about it, but it's another one of those things of, is brackish water better? Could we do something else? What's the most efficient use of our resource and our money and energy use to do this? Because distilling produced water takes a lot of energy too.
All right, let's see if we can fit one more question in here.
We're seeing that as an option for offshore wind generation. So that's going to be fun, especially for island states that don't have to import 90% of their energy. It's a great opportunity for them.
Well, okay, so Joshua told us that electrolysis requires water treated to a high standard. So how can we be talking about using seawater?
No, there's a process, but also some of them are distilling them out there, like in the seawater.
I mean, you can clean up seawater. They do it in Israel a lot for desalination for drinking water. But I mean, it would, seawater is going to be about 10 times as much salt as brackish groundwater. So I mean, you can get it, but it's going to take more energy to get.
It's going to take more energy. I mean, like, you just have to have the luxury.
It's the least interesting option right now.
Right.
Okay.
Right. I mean,
and I think the way this plays into it though is all of it is cost and balance in weighing the different options. And are we making the most efficient use of that investment in that place, in that community, in that economy for our, if we look at hydrogen, are we using hydrogen in a place where we could directly electrify instead, and that would be a more efficient path to the outcome we want? Or are we strategically using hydrogen in places where it's really hard to electrify and this is our best outcome? I think the same goes for how you look at your water resource. If you're spending money on treating water for this reason versus if we find the silver bullet on treating seawater, what might we do with it for, agriculture or other purposes? So I think it's all about balancing in this transition, where are we using the most strategic molecule in the most strategic place, and why, and what work have we done to demonstrate it's good for the climate and it's good for the community in that place.
All right. Thanks. Well, folks, I think that's a wrap.
Let's give a round of applause to our amazing panel and moderator.